Hi everyone, and I'm back with another video because I binged and finished Zack Snyder's Twilight of the Gods on Netflix. And what do I think about it? I liked it, I enjoyed it, I had a really good time watching it, I binged it all in one go, so clearly I had a really good time. But was it perfect? No, not by any means. And after finishing it and having more time to ponder it all, I do think that there are plenty of flaws in it. And they kind of are in general the same flaws that you'd see in most of Zack Snyder's works in general, so yep, as some would say, it's a very typical Zack Snyder fare. Before we get to negatives though, first let's discuss the positives, but the first thing I'll talk about is that animation is spectacular, it's beautiful, it's rich, it's literally one of the most beautifully animated shows I've ever seen, which says a lot. So animation and the visuals, spectacular. And also what I also loved is the action scenes, the violence and gore. Yep, also very typical Zack Snyder stuff that he is very into. So yes, the action scenes are great, and it's also very gory, and I love gory, especially Zack Snyder's type, and also very rich visually. But now let's talk about the story, which is where we're getting more into the gray area territory. There are parts of the story that I really loved, but the way it generally was executed is where I think is an inherent problem with Zack Snyder's storytelling. Like, the best comparison I can give this is 300. By the way, it's my favorite movie of Zack Snyder, even though from a pure objective standpoint, 300 is rich visually, fantastic action, but you can't say that story is particularly deep. And in Twilight of the Gods though, it's a bigger problem because Twilight of the Gods story clearly very much tries to be deep and complex with some rich themes, but I can't say it fully succeeds in that. Whereas with 300 never ever intended to be deep and thematic and rich, but this clearly tries to be, but I can't say it quite is. The story takes place in Norse mythology, and it basically attempts to portray Ragnarok, which is basically an event that's the prophesized event that's supposed to be the end of all the Norse mythology pantheon. So the story is that half-giant Sigrid and a human man Leif are in love and they are getting married in the world of the giants, in Sigrid's world, and then Thor arrives and he basically slaughters all of Sigrid's family during her wedding day, and Sigrid embarks on a revenge together with Leif, and she wants to kill Odin because he killed her family. So yes, some would say another revenge story, which it kind of is, but with a Zack Snyder and Norse mythology paint on it. And then there are some characters that are joining Leif and Sigrid on their journey. And for the first few episodes, I actually thought that the story was really good and engaging, and I was really excited because all those characters have their own arcs and backstories and all that. But afterwards, the show almost does nothing with those characters. It's just like their backstories are mentioned a couple of times and then they aren't much discussed. Like episode 6, that was probably the best episode actually, but this is the moment where actually they all sit down and discuss all their backstories, and we get some really interesting flashbacks to a backstory of every character, and we also learn how Sigrid and Leif met in the first place, actually, how Sigrid was actually born in the world of the giants, but because her mother was human, she was never as big as other giants, and she never quite felt at home. But then, when she left the world of the giants and met a human Leif, and fell in love with him, that's where she finally felt home. And then, of course, they tried to get married in her world, and we all know what happened. At this point, I already said it. On the theme that accompanies Leif and Sigrid on their journey for revenge against Thor and other Norse gods is this badass woman named Hervor, but her backstory is like barely explored. Like, she mentions that she had 3 sons who are all in Valhalla at this point, which means that they're in the afterlife, in the Norse afterlife, they're dead. And I was immediately more interested in her character and all, but then, other than that, she's just there mostly, and that barely has any impact on the story and all that. Like, her sons then are only mentioned several more times, but nothing, like, because in contrast to Sigrid, whose entire backstory we actually saw in the flashback in episode 6, which I think was the best episode by far in the series, Hervor's backstory with her 3 sons is just mentioned a few times, but then it never gets explored anymore, and after that she's just mostly just like a side character, nothing else. Again, the actual story and the setting are wonderful, and there is a lot of potential for an amazing animated show here. The problem is that the show doesn't really live up to its full potential. That said, it's obvious that almost every episode has to end with some spectacular violent action in a very typical Zack Snyder fashion, and again, I do love Zack Snyder type action scenes, and I do think all the action and fight scenes in this show were great. I really like all the action scenes in Twilight of the Gods, but at the same time, this is actually one of those shows that was far more interesting when the characters were actually talking to each other, and the more we were getting to know about the characters, their motivations, their arcs, and what they're planning, getting to know more about them. But then unfortunately, the show would quickly have to move on to some brutal action scene, which was far less interesting than any of their interaction between the characters. And honestly, I think this is a perfect example of a show that should have longer episodes, and also there should be more of them. There shouldn't be 8 episodes, there should be like 12 episodes, and they should be longer, like 40 minutes, and the finale shouldn't even be 40 minutes, it is like 42. The finale should be like an hour at least, because the final episode is also one of the most underwhelming things. I don't even know if this was supposed to be an ending or a cliffhanger, and perhaps it's because I don't think there was really much room to breathe. Honestly, for me at least, it very much felt like a cliffhanger, and I'm really hoping it is, because there seems to be more story going on, and I can't say the show ended on a very satisfying note, so in all honesty, I'm really hoping this is actually a cliffhanger, and if it's an actual ending, then it shows the underlying problem with the show. It barely actually explored any of the interesting themes and deeper story elements that it presented, and instead it just desperately needed to end on a spectacular battle. Again, there is a lot to love in the show. The animation is simply rich, and it's literally one of the richest and most amazing animations I've ever seen, and all the visuals are wonderful, and I really also like the designs of the characters and the Norse gods. Yeah, I love the designs of the characters, and again, there is a lot of potential for a good story here. The problem is that the story is never given enough room to breathe, and because of that, the ending was very underwhelming. Unless they are planning season 2, which I'm hoping they do, because if this is the ending of the show, then it was a very underwhelming, confusing ending. But again, if you love Zack Snyder, then I think you likely love Twilight of the Gods. If you like some really good animation, then I think you can at the very least appreciate the animation, at least. But if you want good, rich, deep storytelling, then you might enjoy Twilight of the Gods, but I do think you might be a little bit underwhelmed by it. But overall, I did enjoy it. I say I enjoyed Twilight of the Gods, and I'm hoping that there will be more, because there is so much potential in the story that this first season very much wasted. So if it's only season 1, then I'm really hoping that season 2 will dive far deeper into the story and flesh out characters and their interactions a lot more. But then again, this is Zack Snyder, who mostly cares about action and visuals, so who knows. But thank you guys for checking out this review. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I'll talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you then, bye!